Okay, so you talk so much about truth. Why do you think it's so hard for people to talk about that naturally? And why do you think it's important?
As a kid, I know I wasn't always rewarded for telling the truth.
Yes.
You know, you get in trouble, and there's a definite hierarchy in most parental situations where the parent has all the power. So I learned, and I think a lot of people learn how to tell lies. And I heard a developmental expert say, don't get upset when your kid tells a lie. That's an important part of their evolution, that they actually learn to fabricate something. And I was like, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. So, that was just my life. Now, my parents, and I haven't spoken about this on our podcast, my parents are good people with integrity. So it's not like they lie. It's not like they go out of their way to rip someone off. In fact, I just found out yesterday my mother was selling their caravan. And my mother's 78, my dad's 83 or something. They're selling their caravan, which is a big deal because I guess they're no longer going to go caravanning. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. But she said this guy drove from Sydney in the rain 2 hours to check out the caravan. He's deaf, can't speak, he's doing sign language and whatever. And he said he sent the money via his app. Well, the money hadn't arrived. And my mother said she didn't have the heart to send him back to Sydney and have him do another drive to come and get the caravan when the money arrives. So she let him take the caravan. She's like, I'm just going to trust him that the money's going to come. $8,000 caravan.
Wow.
So I really have a lot of respect for my parents' integrity. You see, if my mother could ever, steal money from someone else, then she wouldn't trust this guy. But she couldn't even imagine that someone could not follow through with the money. So they have that, and yet a lot was hidden as I grew up. Like maybe you just don't say something because it's going to be awkward, or you don't say that because it is going to get you in trouble, or you tell a white lie. Like that's very common. Fortunately for me, I discovered personal growth, and I had some really good coaches who were showing me another way of being. So they showed me what it's like to have pristine integrity and to have those tough conversations. I had to make a list of all the people that I had anything less than full love for. So people I resented, people I hated, people I felt guilty about how I treated them right throughout my entire life. And then they're like, okay, now go and call those people and complete. I said, no, you're kidding. No, I'm not going to call that bully from high school and tell him I've hated him for 20 years and I'm letting it go. I'm not going to call that girl who dumped me twice and gave me the cold shoulder. I'm not going to call that boss who I sued and see if we're good now. And they helped me dive into like why I didn't want to do it and all the fears I had around it. And then they showed me a way to go and do it. And I tell you what, Moneeka, those calls were incredible. I was terrified. But when I actually got on the phone with these human beings and spoke my truth and was connected with a slightly open heart, wow, these people surprised me over and over and over again. The bully said, what can I do now to help you or us move forward?
Mm.
The girl who dumped me twice, I said, I don't need an apology. You don't have to do anything. Just listen. She said, I'm so sorry. I was young and stupid, and I'm really sorry for how I treated you. I'm in tears. The
Mm.
boss that I sued, I said, yeah, I just want to check if we're good. Is there anything I can do? He said, well, at the time, I'm sure I didn't enjoy it, but that's water under the bridge. And then we got talking about his life. We never had a personal conversation. Now he's sharing about his divorce and what it was like going through that. So I'm an advocate and evangelist for truth, not all the time, and I'm happy to get into that, but 9 out of 10 times, if you're willing to model courage and to take a risk and reach out and connect and share your truth with another human, 9 times out of 10, I found you'll be happy that you did it.
So I've done an interesting thing, very similar to what you just talked about, but I didn't actually have the conversations with the people. Some of it is just because I don't have access to them. But for me, I did it a lot for my own closure. And I think what happened for me also is that moving forward, I have I make sure that I don't miss the opportunity for truth or for honesty. So maybe I don't go back, although I can see how incredibly healing that would be, to just get that all out. But it also sets the ground for work for what we do in the future. And really, the past doesn't determine who we are, who are we going to become. It's who we decide to be today that decides who we're going to become, right? And so doing that exercise, even internally, to make the decision to not miss opportunities for truth, I think is also a possible good benefit. What do you think? It's shown up really well in my life.
Can you ask the question again?
Okay, yeah. Basically, so I have never recommended to go back to those people,
Right.
but I did the exercise for myself so that in the future I would I would remain open and
Uh,
to capture any opportunities for truth. And do you feel like that's valuable, or do you really recommend people go deep and talk to all of the people
oh
that they
yeah, I love
can?
that
Or
question.
yeah.
Look, um, some people say, like, should you say anything? Like, let's take a current situation. Some
Mhm.
people say, well, should you say anything? Should you not? I know a guy who had the three times rule. If it comes up in your brain three times, it's time to say something about it.
Mm,
Now, your
mhm,
question's a good one. What if it's something from the past? Well, look, if it depends how committed you are to growth and self-expression and emotional freedom.
mhm,
If it's a minor thing and you haven't thought about it in 20 years, all right, maybe you don't care. But if it's something you have thought about more often than that, it might be something unresolved for you. Now, I do believe it's possible to get some healing and some completion by writing a letter,
mhm,
and you don't even have to mail it. You can mail it to your. This is particularly important if someone's died and you cannot speak to them physically. You can have a role play conversation with them, or with your coach, or you can write a letter.
mhm.
Big fan of that. In fact, I had someone in prison and I was coaching them on reconciling with their mother, and they were so scared to have the relationship. I said, write a letter, and then it's up to you if you want to mail it. You may not get
Mhm.
the result you want, but it's up to you if you want to take that extra risk. Now, I, having gone through this myself and had those scary conversations with people from my past, I am a massive fan for that. It takes courage. So you get to exercise that muscle
Mhm.
of courage, and it allows you to actually, you don't know what impact that conversation is going to have on the other person.
Mhm.
So it could, my brother went and did this with an ex partner, and he wasn't going to call her. He's like, oh, it's weird. I've moved on. She's moved on. And his coach said, you'd be surprised. Just have the call. And so he
Mhm.
did. And he said, look, I want you to know it wasn't you. It was me. You are wonderful. I just didn't want to be in relationship at that time. She broke down crying.
Mm.
She'd been carrying that around for years, thinking there was something wrong with her. And he said to me, and this was a guy who had no money at the time, he said, that conversation was worth $10,000 to me.
Mm.
The
Interesting.
difference I made in her life. So I'm a big fan of doing it. Now, there's a way to do it well, and there's a way to do it badly. If you go in with, you wronged me, I'm a victim, and I need you to apologize, look, that might work, but you're setting yourself up for a tough time. If you can get to a space where you don't actually need anything from the other person other than listening, it's going to go better. I actually have a model for this. It's called the CARE model, CARE. And I'm
Mhm.
happy to give it away to listeners. Particularly if you remind me at the end when we give away the URL, I'll tell them
Okay.
how to find that. It's a wonderful download. It'll give you clarity. So you don't even have to decide if you're going to have the conversation with a person. Just fill in the worksheet, get the clarity. After that, you'll know if you want to go and have it with them, and it'll give you a wonderful paint by numbers system to have the conversation.
Nice. This conversation could go so much deeper than we've got time for. So I wish we had more time. But I think that there's also the whole conversation of abuse and stuff like that. Like, do you go back to people that have done that? So, but I think the care model might help work through whether it's a good idea or not, right? In that circumstance.
Oh, it's wonderful because initially you've just got this feeling like, I don't like that person. I wouldn't like to see them on the street. I'm annoyed at that person. That person's just a jerk. That's all you've got. When you
Mhm.
do the worksheet in the care model, you will get clear on what your intention is, like what's a
Mhm.
positive intention if you were going to have the conversation, and what are you afraid of?
Mhm.
That's good information. Oh, I'm
Yep.
afraid they're going to think I'm an idiot. I'm afraid it's going to make things worse. I'm afraid it's going to be, I'll feel awkward. Just get clear. The clarity is wonderful. And then there's a checkbox. I'm like, it'll ask you what could go wrong. And then there's a checkbox. I am willing to accept these consequences. And if
Or
you're
not.
willing to check that box,
Mhm.
okay, you're good. If you're
Mhm.
not willing to check the box, for example, the conversation, I've had a conversation where I confessed to a crime. I
Mhm.
called someone. I said, it was me. I was, when I was a teenager, I did this thing. I'm very sorry. How can I make it right? I could have gone to jail.
Mhm.
You may not be willing to accept that consequence. And I respect that.
Mhm.
Or I confessed when I was 18, I did one of the worst things in my life. I cheated on my partner and I
Mhm.
felt so bad about it. And so if I was filling in the worksheet, what could go wrong? She'll break up with me and never go back with me again.
Mhm.
I checked the box. I'm willing to accept that consequence because my intention is to have a relationship full of integrity and trust. And so I'm going to risk everything to have that. And so I did. I
Interesting.
went and had that conversation. She did break up with me. I had to earn her trust back, and we ended up getting married. And while we're no longer married, I just went and stayed a couple of years ago with her and her new husband and her 6-year-old boy who calls me Uncle David. So again, I'm a big fan for telling the truth. I'm a big fan for not cheating in the first place. But if you have been dumb enough to go and make a mistake like that, I personally am a fan for making it right and risking the relationship, but you may choose not to. You're like, no, I'm not willing to risk that. So that's not a conversation you would have
Interesting.
unless I'm your coach. If I'm your coach, you're going to be hard pressed to get away with not making things like that right because I know what's available
Right.
when you do.